such a kind of momentous moment for us because, you know, Sean and I, you know, we grew up very sort of politically motivated, and this was something we went to college together. God,
long time ago.
Yeah, more than one generation ago. Scary. And we were both political science majors and history buffs
yeah.
at in New York at a university. And you know, when we started Wanderlust, you know, obviously we cared so much about yoga, and my wife Skylar's a yogi, but we were always trying to infuse it, I think, with meaning beyond just kind of what we physically do. And you know, when we use the word yoga, we think of it pretty broadly. It's about our practice on the mat, but it's also about our practice and our commitment to mindful living, to reducing our carbon footprint, to cultivating some personal spirituality, to consuming ethically and consciously. And we feel that this yoga community, those are the values that define it. And we have some incredibly powerful voices within that yoga community championing those values. And I think if there's any, I guess, thing that we would want for this festival to be is a reflection of those values. And while we have a lot of great leaders within our community championing these values, we are so lucky to have found someone that is championing and leading this cause kind of outside and at a broader level, and speaking to people that we might not just be normally speaking to. You know, Tim is really the only national elected official on the front lines advocating for mindfulness. And that is just incredible for us as a community to have someone like you. Tim is working so hard to integrate yoga and mindful practices in the areas where we need it most, like schools and the military and in our government institutions. So we are so grateful that you've taken your time to be here. You know, what a great leader you are for our community. So for those of you that also are wondering why I'm holding a football, Tim also has a previous life where, you know, I hear he was a pretty good football player. I don't know. But we actually got a Wanderlust, maybe you can see, logoed football that we want to present to Tim. I'm going to lateral him the football and the microphone just to see how he does. All right, there he is. So we yield the floor to Tim. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hand for these guys. I mean, my God. This is obviously very cool for me too, because like a lot of people who have done yoga or practice mindfulness or meditation or whatever, you know, there's a period where you have your little mindfulness, meditation, yoga practice over here in your life, and then you have your work life. And I'm noticing more and more now people bringing this all together and recognizing that it's actually supposed to be integrated. Like, that's the whole idea. And I think this festival is really kind of a symbol of, I think, of the broader community recognizing that it needs to come together. And it needs to come together because there's so many needs off the mat. And Sean Korn and I will be speaking together later to talk about, you know, getting off the mat or off the cushion and taking this out into society. And a lot of people will ask, let me thank Hay House too. Patty, my editor, and Nancy are here, they're just terrific because, again, it's not just about selling books. It's not just about making money. It's about what are those books about? And when we do make money, what are we going to reinvest it back in, and who are the authors that we're going to support and promote? Because it's not just about the business. It's about this broader movement that's happening in the country. This is not a fumble.
Pass
I used to like to run the option, so I'll give you a little option. Very good. Very good. A lot of people, you know, ask. I'm a congressman from Ohio, and people want to know, like, how did you get into this? How did it all start? And it was funny. It was maybe in last October, we were doing an event in New York City, and it was called Creating a Mindful Society, and it was John Kabat-Zinn, people doing mindfulness in the military. I was a keynote speaker. There were others who were there. And there was a woman who was there from Wisconsin who works for Richie Davidson, who's one of the top neuroscientists in the country doing research on mindfulness. He does a lot of work with the Dalai Lama and the monks that are associated with the Dalai Lama. So anyway, this woman brings her sister to the conference, who was a little bit interested in mindfulness, but she, I think, primarily came because it was in New York, so she was coming to kind of hang out. And her and I started to talk, and I knew the one sister from Wisconsin pretty well, but I didn't really know her at all. So we chit-chatted, and it was on a Friday, and we were done, and we were all going to go get a beer or something to eat, so we were all walking out together, and it was raining, and we were just going up a block or so. And it really started to rain, so we walk out, started to kind of hustle down the street, then it really started to rain, huge cloudburst, and we got separated, and the two sisters ended up in a parking garage out of the rain, and I ended up under some awning just waiting for it to pass, and the two sisters started talking. And the one sister, who was kind of new, said, was that a congressman that I just met? And she said, yeah. And he practices mindfulness? She said, yeah. He's writing a book about mindfulness? The sister said, yeah. And the sister asked her, will he still be a congressman once the book comes out? So there's a general sense that these two worlds can't come together. And you know, people want to know how'd you get here. And I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I have an Italian Catholic mother, and I had two Italian Catholic grandparents who prayed the rosary all the time. And I remember growing up as a boy, watching them pray the rosary. And there were rosaries in my grandmother's house. There were rosaries everywhere, on the chair, on the bedpost. When me and my brother got our first car, an '81 Oldsmobile, the first thing that went in was a rosary around the rearview mirror. And so they were always spending time taking care of themselves. Mindfulness, the rosary, you know, contemplation, call it whatever you want. They had a period of time throughout their day that they spent getting themselves together. And you know, it wasn't just a show, because I remember riding my bike down to see them when I was a boy. They lived about 2 blocks away. I'd ride my bike down to see them, just a surprise visit, and they would be TVs off, radios off. They would be sitting in the house praying the rosary. And it was a daily ritual for them to spend time in quiet. And later on, after high school, I went to Catholic school my whole life. Later on, a priest taught me centering prayer, which is basically a Christian meditation. Father Thomas Keating has promoted it, and he's not far from here in a monastery. Learned that a little bit, and then flirted on and off with meditation for a while. Eventually got into politics, and it's a kind of a hectic business to begin with. But I got elected in 2003, and you're back and forth between Washington and Ohio. You know, you're in D.C. maybe 3 or 4 days a week, a lot of travel back and forth. And then I'm a Democrat, and we were working, Nancy Pelosi at that time wanted me to help run a 30-something working group, because I was one of the younger guys, and try to reach out to young people. And so I spent most of 03, 04, 05, and 06 traveling the country, raising money, trying to get other Democrats elected. Finally, we took the House back in 2006. I got on the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that spends all of the government money, which is like one of the 2 or 3 most powerful committees in the Congress. So that whole workload came on in 06 and 07. Then there was the presidential election in 08, and that came all the way to Ohio, and it was Secretary Clinton against, you know, the president, and that went into Ohio, so I was involved in that. And it was about the middle of 2008 that I was 35 years old, and I thought to myself, I'm going to be completely burnt out by the time I'm 40. If I keep going at this pace, I'm okay, but I could feel it coming. And I started doing some yoga, and it was that summer that I decided I needed to really jumpstart a meditation practice, because I knew when I did practice meditation, my mind was quieter, I was calmer, more focused, less stress, all of the benefits that we know, same that you get from doing yoga. It was really amazing, and I thought I got to jumpstart my practice. So I got online, started looking for a retreat, and I found one that John Kabat-Zinn was going to do for 5 days. It was called Power Mindfulness Retreat for leaders, primarily, and it was 2 days after the November election. So the timing was perfect. And so I ended up, at that point, after the election, checking. I had 2 BlackBerries at the time for crazy reasons, but I don't anymore. I'm a reformed 2 BlackBerry guy. Checked 2 BlackBerries at the door. No talking, no writing, no reading. You were supposed to be totally quiet. And over the course of the 5 days, John walked us into more and more silence over the course of the week. And I knew John because he sent his book, Coming to Our Senses, to every member of Congress. And there was about 100 pages in there that I read that were about politics and mindfulness in politics and the effect of us and our levels of awareness on the body politic. And, you know, and it's crazy right now in the political world. So anyway, John slowly gave us more and more silence to the point where in the middle of the retreat there was 36 hours of silence. So, you know, you slowly reduced your stress level, things got quieter, and then you had 36 hours of absolutely no talking, no reading, nothing. Just you and walking meditation, you and sitting meditation. And in the middle of that, I had as we were practicing, I was doing a walking meditation by the brook, and my mind, at one point, my mind and my body were exactly in the same spot. And there was just a focus, a concentration, an awareness, a clarity that happened where you were just in the present moment. And I did play a lot of sports in my life. This did not happen a lot, but the few times that I remember, it was like when you're in the zone as an athlete. You're just totally present to what's going on. There's no distractions. It's just, you're right there. And your mind and your body sync up. And I thought, you know, after I had that experience, you know, your mind plays so many tricks on you. My next thought was, this needs to be in our schools. This needs to be in our healthcare system. We need to use this for our veterans who are coming back totally damaged from the war. And so after the retreat, I went up to John, and he said, I think the quote was, "What the hell are you doing here?" And he was obviously surprised that there was a congressman at the retreat. He said, I thought I was going to see, when I heard there was a congressman here, I thought there'd be some burnout person who screwed people over their whole lives and came to my retreat to like ask forgiveness or something like that. But I said, John, this needs to be in our schools. This needs to be in our health. This is such an easy thing to help with so many big problems. And I'm sitting on the appropriations committee that's spending money and looking at all the statistics for health care over the next 30 years, seeing fall behind with educational attainment and to other countries, see the vets coming back, 18 vets commit suicide a day in our country, all of these things. So he said, well, there's a lot going on, and he basically sent me on a journey over the course of the next year to meet the scientists, to meet the educators, to meet the healthcare professionals, to meet the people who are doing the work in the military. And that really, that experience of going around and meeting those people, that's what led to the book, A Mindful Nation, because I saw these people doing the work in the field of mindfulness, and I learned about it myself, and I just thought this has to get out there. There is no way that I'm going to be able to like know all of this stuff and then not share it, So that was kind of the process for me to begin to start integrating my own life with mindfulness, and went on more retreats and started a daily practice where I sit every morning, do a lot more yoga now than I ever did in my life. So I went on this journey and I learned about the science, and I learned about how our body evolved to really appreciate fear. Fear was very helpful for us as a species for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The problem is, it ramps our bodies up, gets ready to fight the predator. But the problem is today, the predator is not around We watch negative news stories. We read negative newspaper articles. We have too much negativity in our life, too much busyness, and it ramps up that system that was put in place for our survival. And if we don't be careful about it, it could lead to our destruction, because we see the levels of sickness now that we have all over the place. And I learned a lot about what stress does to us and to our bodies. Heart disease, high blood pressure, ulcers, type 2 diabetes, erectile dysfunction. I mean, it's like soup to nuts. You name the problem, and a lot of times stress is a major factor for what's happening. And so I learned from the scientists that when you get stressed out, it's actually inflaming your body. There's inflammation in your body. And mindfulness and sitting, breathing, following your breath, staying centered, actually acts as a cooling agent to cool your body down. And here I am on funding the health care system in our country, and thinking, how simple. Like, why wouldn't we teach our doctors in medical school to teach their patients to practice mindfulness before they start writing prescription drugs off? It's a much simpler way, and if it doesn't work, fine, come back in a few weeks. We'll try something else. Maybe then we'll give you a prescription, but the prescription shouldn't be the default position. And the more I learned about this, the more I learned that your body, and we all know this, and you all know this too, and obviously, your body naturally wants to heal itself. That's what it does. It gets rid of infections, it gets rid of inflammation, it does all kinds of things to heal itself if we don't inject really high amounts of stress into it. And they did a study, which I talk about in the book, John Kabat-Zinn with Dr. Richie Davidson, on psoriasis patients. So they had two groups of psoriasis patients. One group, evidently one of the treatments for psoriasis is you go into a light box. So they had one group go into a light box and get the treatment. They had another group go into the light box and practice mindfulness while they were in the light box. And the group that practiced mindfulness while they were in the light box needed 4 times less the treatments than the group that just went into the light box. So it was so significant that they thought they screwed the study up, so they did it again. And they got the exact same results. So here we are, and here I am looking at this thinking, okay, now, how much is it for one trip into the light box? Get that number. Okay, there's going to be 4 times less trips into the light box. So multiply that number by that number. And how many people in the country have psoriasis? That's your number of the number you could save. So let's study, which we need to do a big longitudinal study. Let's figure out how mindfulness can have an impact on healthcare over the course of 10 years with heart disease. You think of all the medication for high blood pressure, how much money do we spend on medication for ulcers, for type 2 diabetes. Start adding these numbers up, we're into the billions and billions and billions of dollars that we could prevent, because we are actually teaching people to participate in their own health care. And I think this crosses political lines, because what has more individual responsibility about it than saying, okay, we're going to teach you how to take care of yourself, and you have a responsibility to take care of yourself. That's an empowering thing, but we're going to give you the tools to help you. I think that's why I think this doesn't have to be necessarily a Democrat or Republican thing. And like Jim Wallace said, who's a pretty, he's a big Democrat, he says we don't need to go further to the left, we don't need to go further to the right, we all need to go a little bit deeper. And if we go a little bit deeper, we'll start addressing a lot of these challenges differently. Same idea about learning about the brain for education. We have in a lot of school districts around here, doesn't matter where, in Youngstown, Ohio, Warren, Ohio, you have 20, 30, some districts, 40% of the kids that don't graduate from high school at all. Now, we only have over 300 million people in America, and we're competing with the rest of the globe, 1.3 or 4 billion in China, 1.3 or 4 billion in India, and we only have 300 plus million. I think it's an awful idea. Not only is it unjust to, an injustice to those kids, but how are we going to compete as a country if we're just going to say, okay, 30% of the kids just aren't going to make it out of high school. Sorry. Tough. No. That's not the values of your community. It's not the values I was taught. And now I believe with mindfulness, we have an opportunity, and yoga, an opportunity to deal with the issues that a lot of these kids have to deal with. What I learned about was the brain, and the older part of your brain is your amygdala. And your amygdala gets really activated when you're in a stressful situation. And basically what happens is you go into fight, flight, or fear. Your amygdala gets really activated in the back part of your brain, and information goes into your amygdala and only gets processed in your amygdala. So, your executive functions that you need for learning, working memory, decision making, attention span, balancing all of your emotional states, all happens up in your prefrontal cortex, your executive functions. But when you're under a lot of stress, information never gets up there. So when these kids who live in violent communities, violent neighborhoods, abusive relationships, they're under a constant state of post-traumatic stress. Their amygdala is constantly activated. And and I'm for more funding for education and more funding for teachers and more investments in the schools for a variety of different things, which is a whole other talk. But it doesn't matter how much money we spend if the kid's amygdala is all jacked up and they can't learn anything. It doesn't matter how good the teacher is. They're not paying attention because their amygdala is all cranked up. It doesn't matter how good the program is that you're trying to teach them. It doesn't matter. We got to get back to the fundamentals, the blocking and tackling. You can't run a good play if the line's not blocking. I didn't think I'd use a football analogy out here, but what the hell, Yeah, give me the ball back. Go down about 10 yards and cut across the middle. And mindfulness and other things. I'm sure yoga, I'm sure art and music and other things, but we are finding out that mindfulness in particular calms the amygdala down and allows that information to get through your amygdala and into your prefrontal cortex, which is exactly what you need for your working memory. How are you going to do algebra if you can't access your working memory? How are you going to do well in science? How are you going to do well writing, remembering the rules, grammatical rules or what? You can't. And mindfulness is an opportunity for us to calm the amygdala down, and I've seen it. We got money for our 2 school districts in my area, Youngstown and Warren City school districts, and I see it with these kids, and I talk to the teachers. In Warren City schools, they actually added, we got money for 50 teachers, they actually added an additional 30 teachers to the program from their own money because they started to see the impact. I talked to the principal a couple years ago, and he says they started in kindergarten and 1st grade, 2nd grade. And the principal said, we don't even worry about the kindergarten anymore. Like, we don't have any issues with them. We feel bad we don't worry about the kindergarten class actually in our staff meetings. But the reason is that we attribute it to this social and emotional learning and mindfulness practice that they have going on. And you meet kids, and teachers will tell you about kids that it's transforming. And they said they're not only well behaved now, they're also doing better in writing and doing better in math because they're able to calm down. They have a little peace corner in one area of the room, and if it's all about identifying your emotions, and if you get cranked up, you go to the peace corner and you write or you meditate or you color or you do whatever. And she told me this beautiful story of a little girl we met there who lost her entire family last summer in a house fire. Tragic story. She was staying with her grandmother and the house burned down, and she lost, I think, 2 or 3 brothers and sisters and both her parents. Beautiful young girl. And you couldn't really tell, and the teachers mentioned it, and we went over, and she was in charge of showing me the peace corner, and we're sitting in this little peace corner, and the teacher said, without the mindfulness and the social and emotional learning, this girl would have never made it. But everyone is a little bit more aware of what she's going through. She's more aware of what she's going through. She oftentimes goes to the peace corner, and she started writing. And the teacher said she really wasn't that good of a writer. Kept writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And as I'm walking out, they said, that little girl that you met, she's submitting an essay to hospice on suffering. And it was just, to me, it was really kind of indicative of slowing down, becoming aware, and then teaching kids how to deal with a lot of these complex situations that they're inevitably going to be in. I don't know what the economy is going to look like in 10 years. I don't know what the economy is going to look like in 20 years. If I told you, I'd be lying to you, and anybody who tells you is lying to you. Nobody knows, but we better give our kids the ability to concentrate, focus. Let's not just yell at them to pay attention. Let's actually teach them how to pay attention. And mindfulness is the how to pay attention. You can cultivate your attention span. Mind goes off, come back to your breath. Mind goes off, come back to your breath. Because if you can't mobilize your attention and place it on a problem or a challenge or a topic or whatever you're doing in school, you're not going to do well. Let's get back to the fundamentals and teach these kids what we now know that the brain science is revealing to us. Why wouldn't we use it? We know. We got the brain science. We know what's going on now. We didn't know 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. We know now. So let's adapt the system to be able to address it. One other thing they do in the classrooms that I think is really cool, they actually teach tactics on how to deal with difficult situations, bullying, teen pregnancy, drugs, all of these things. But one of the things they teach is tolerance. And they use the book Stella Luna. Has anyone ever read the book Stella Luna, remember it? So there's this bat that loses its parents and grows up as a bird, thinks he grows up as a bird. And then later on, when he's older, realizes that he's a bat and has an identity crisis. And then, what they do is they draw a Venn diagram on the board, and the kids got to go up and they've got to say, okay, what did they have in common, the birds and the bats? What did they have that were unique to them? And what did they have in common? And what they had in common you put in the middle of the Venn diagram. And then they had the kids get up. So the kids would say, well, they got wings, they both have wings, they both have eyes, they both have this, one's black, one's white, this, that, and the other. Then they put the kids up and they stand them right next to each other. And, more often than not, there's an African American kid and there's a white kid. There's a Latino kid and there's a African American kid. But anyway, there's just two kids, African American kid and a white kid, and they're sitting there, and I'm just watching this, like my jaw's on the floor, thinking, because we have race issues in a lot of these communities. There's racial issues. There's a lack of integration and the whole 9 yards. And these kids are sitting there at third grade saying, what are your differences? You're black, I'm white. Your hair's curly, my hair's straight. Your eyes are brown, my eyes are blue. And then, what do we have in common? And they say the most wonderful things. And the thing that got me the other day were the two kids were standing there, and the one kid looked and says, well, we both have eyes, we both have feet. They couldn't think of anything. The teacher says, okay, one more. And the little boy says, we're both human beings. Warren, Ohio. I'm going, wow, this is great. I mean, what else is there to teach these kids? You got a lot more in common than you do not. And that is what I think slowing down and implementing this kind of stuff into the curriculum, that there's an appreciation for awareness and emotions and all of these things. And the teachers really, it's resonated with the teachers. Went to the fourth day of a 5-day training, and this was right before school, and the teachers were like, I walked in, and I basically brought this program. I got $1 million from the Appropriations Committee. We go in, it was my idea, so now I'm walking in, it's actually getting implemented. I'm kind of nervous because I'm thinking, okay, the young hotshot congressman had an idea to teach the teachers how to teach, and they've been doing it for 30 years. So I'm thinking, oh, this may not be good. You just kind of have those negative thoughts run through your head. But I get in there, and it was fantastic. And the teacher, the lady who's running the program, Linda Lantieri, had a globe that was stuffed, and she was throwing it around, and she would say, okay, I'll throw it to you. Tell the congressman what you were thinking or how you think this week is going, what you think, like, dislike, whatever. Throws it to one teacher, I kind of brace, and she says, I've been waiting for this for 30 years. For someone to teach me how to take care of myself and then make me more able and capable to go in and actually teach these kids. Ball goes to the next one. The woman stands up, she says, I'm already treating my own kids differently at home. We hadn't started school yet, but at home I'm already treating my own kids differently. Now, they weren't sitting in a retreat like I did with John. I mean, this was like they'd ring the bell and sit for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe in the morning and maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the day for 4 days. I mean, it's not a lot of, but they felt it. And I just think we're all going so fast on the treadmill, constantly going. The treadmill's getting faster, getting steeper. And then we ask these teachers who are dealing in this world to go into the classroom and educate our kids and the parents, and it's just, but I just think slowing down just a little bit is having a profound effect, and I saw it in that room. Ball goes to the next woman. This lady, now I'm getting like freaking out. Next woman gets the thing, and she says, I feel like I'm born again. She's like, I can't believe how this is helping me and how much better I feel, how much more relaxed I am. And finally, they threw the ball to a guy in the back. There's about 4 dudes in the room, and I was one of them, and my staffer was another one. And there was like maybe 2 or 3 male teachers. So I was like, okay, maybe the dudes aren't going to like this like the women like it. And this guy gets the globe, and he says, I wasn't sure about all this when I first came, but I will tell you that last night I was at my daughter's soccer game, and I was actually at my daughter's soccer game. And I was watching her. She was running, and I just thought how grown up she's gotten and how beautiful she is running down the field and how quickly she's grown up. And the sky was blue and the grass was green and the sun was out. He's like, it was just the most precious moment. And that's it. And that's what we want. It's not the money and the cars and all the consumerism and materialism and all of that. That's what we want. And there's the same opportunities with the veterans. There's a program called Mindfulness training that Liz Stanley from Georgetown is doing in working very closely with the Marines. There's studies coming out now that will blow your mind. And it basically gives these Marines like a mental resiliency. They call it like a mental armor to how to negotiate all these very difficult situations. And I'm not interested in teaching Marines how to be better killers. I'm of no interest to me. I was one of the big advocates against the war in Iraq, very vocal about it. But this is about teaching our soldiers, our Marines, our airmen, who serve our country. And the politicians send these guys off to war. They're serving, doing what they're told. And these guys can be in very complicated situations where, one day they're in a firefight and they lose 3 of their best friends. And the next day, they're patrolling a civilian village and dealing with peacekeeping operations of sorts. And if we're not training them to, maybe let some of that go so that you're present, so that we don't have tragedies happen because of a lot of the stuff that you may bring to that next moment, I think it's important for us to do. And not to mention, there's a lot of opportunities, and I think with yoga and yogic breathing and a lot of other things for these vets that are coming back who aren't necessarily the mindfulness, telling someone who's done 3 tours in Iraq or Afghanistan, okay, you got to sit in that chair for 30 minutes and follow your breath. It's not a real good entry point, and what a lot of the scientists are telling me now, that a lot of the deep yogic breathing that engages them physically is a much better entry point, and it recalibrates their nervous system. You have like a gas pedal and a brake pedal, and when you have cortisol, which is the stress hormone, run through your body for 15 months straight, you will completely throw your nervous system out of whack. So they tell you it's like pressing the gas and brake pedal of your car at the same time, or just on and off and on and off, and you get all this erratic behavior, and that's why we see 18 suicides a day from veterans in our country. It's a huge huge black mark. And what they're saying is that deep breathing and some of the somatic exercises and some mindfulness begin to recalibrate your nervous system and bring it back into balance. So these are all the things that I learned that I think could be extremely helpful for us as a country. And when you start to think about, like with the Marines, for example, that the average stay for a Marine is 5 to 6 years. And then they go back to the communities that they came from. So if you just think about this as I begin to wrap up, I'd be happy to take any questions and talk more about it. You can begin to see how we can shift the culture. And this is why I love what Jeff and Sean are doing. I love what Sean Korn's doing. I love what Hay House is doing. I love what I talk about in the Mindful Nation and all of the people doing the work in there, because you can begin to see how we can shift the culture. You think about if we put it in the schools. You think about the changes that those teachers are already seeing and the kids, the benefits that they're already receiving. Think if we train our doctors. So when that kid's parent, who also is involved in the SEL mindfulness program, there's also a parental component, and that'll blow your mind too, some of the responses you get from parents that say things like, after like 3 or 4 classes, they say, I didn't realize I was so angry. And I didn't realize I was throwing all my anger on my kid. Now, if that's all that parent learns, that's like amazing. And you start to think about, so the kid's learning in the school, the teacher learns it, gets trained through professional development, and I think we should actually set up regional training centers for these kinds of things for all of our social workers, healthcare workforce. They're burnt out like crazy now. Get them in there and allow them to do that. But you see teachers doing it, kids are learning it, teachers are getting trained, parents are getting a little taste of it. Then the parent goes to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, you know, let's sit down and talk. Maybe let me teach you mindfulness, because I had to do it when I was in med school. It was a credit that I had to get every single year. So then the parent sees it in school, and then they see it also from their doctor. Oh yeah, and then there's a Marine that came back, and the Marine's doing it at the local VFW. You can begin to see how after school programs, summer school programs, prison programs, juvenile justice programs, you can see how it won't take all that long, in my estimation, to begin to shift the culture. And it means we've got to be organized, and that's beginning to happen, to promote these things at a local level. And at the end of every chapter in the book, there's a box that says, what can you do? You know, we need more research. So write your congressman or congresswoman and say, hey, we need more research, we need more money for NIH. Don't cut the NIH budget, put more money in the NIH budget. You know, what can we do? There's an innovation fund in the Department of Education. Write your member of Congress, write your senator, tell them to beef that up so that we can do more research about how this plays out in education. Write your state senators, school board members, do a potluck dinner. You know, all of these different strategies, if we get organized, because this is going to be organic. This is not going to be top down. There's not going to be a Department of Mindfulness, not going to be a Secretary of Mindfulness, not going to be a Department of Yoga. Although Sean Korn would make a great Secretary of Yoga, I think. It's going to be organic. It's going to be communities just slowly connecting with each other, figuring out how to organize and how to put this thing together, and do it in your local school districts. And it gets right back to the yoga, right back to the mindfulness. Where do you start? You start right where you are. Where do you live? Is your kid in school? Start there. You have someone in the military? Start there. Are you in the military? Start there. And if everybody just starts there with the way we can communicate today, we can begin to shift the culture and build a mindful nation. And if we slow down enough, you know, I think we can reconnect with, you know, the values that I think we all share that are basic American values. These aren't anything new. You know, my grandparents you could pull out the elements of the values of this community and put them in front of my grandparents, who would now be 90-some years old, Italian-American Catholic people, and they would say, yeah, I agree with all those. Community? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Conservation? Yeah. You know, understand we shouldn't waste our resources? Of course. Grow fresh food? Yeah. I mean, these are basic values. And, you know, I think we have an opportunity here to transform our country. And people say, well, why would you write this book? A congressman, it's pretty risky. I would be derelict in my duty if I didn't write this book. To know all this stuff, to meet these scientists. And when we present it, I tell my friends in Ohio and people who ask me, break it down. Phil Jackson, basketball coach for the Bulls and the Lakers, winningest most NBA championships of any coach, used mindfulness with his players. You ever hear Michael Jordan? You ever hear of Kobe Bryant? You ever hear of Shaquille O'Neal? They all did this. The United States Marine Corps, not exactly a liberal institution in America. You look at Google, Procter & Gamble, General Mills, Target, all these corporations beginning to implement mindfulness-based programs and creating a space in their offices for their workers to be able to go and do this. It's being studied at Harvard and Wisconsin and Michigan and Stanford and Emory and UCLA and University of Miami, Florida, UMass, George Washington, University of Virginia. Like, all of the major institutions in our country are studying this stuff. What in the hell are we waiting for? We got it. We need to do more. It's not done. The scientists will say, well, we got to do a lot more. And we should, and we will, because we'll continue to build the case. But we have an opportunity to slow people down, have a life that we don't just talk about family values, but we actually value time with our families, and we can create an economy that respects that basic value so that we can all behave like my grandfather did if we want to at 3 o'clock. Got a good job, 3 o'clock he gets home. First place he goes, to the garden. Goes to the garden for a little while. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, beans, a little corn. I can keep going. But he had a great garden. Come back, 4:30, 5 o'clock, little happy hour. Like all his brother-in-laws, they all lived in the same neighborhood. A little glass of wine, rehash the day, family dinner. Next day, rinse, repeat, do the same thing. On the weekends, picnics. Go down to the park, play bocce, throw the football around, cook on the grill, hang out, be together. That's what we need to do, and I think we're not going to get that kind of economy, the kind of health care and all of the other things that we need in place to do that, unless we all slow down. And so this book is an attempt to throw gasoline on the fire that's already going with what you are all doing here, and hope we can just continue to accelerate that. And I think we can bring the change we want to see. So thank you for having me.
First of all, I just want to thank you very much for doing this. As I mentioned to you earlier, I really appreciate especially the medical component. I come to this as a physician, and I'm a physical med and rehab doctor. And basically, I try to work through the mantra of basically eat well, move well, chill well. And what I find is that we live not only in a food desert, but a movement in a chill out desert. And so I have no ability to get those tools to my patients. There is no mindfulness to be had for these folks. I can try, and one of the points I wanted to make, as you're taking this back to Congress and trying to get this into the ACA, trying to get true prevention, not just screening tests of dubious quality and value. It can't just be the physicians. I could have been trained that, but I don't have time, and the system still doesn't reward me for that. In fact, I'm one of the only physicians in my specialty that doesn't just give everybody epidurals for their pain. I actually try to get them to move their bodies, and I use a little bit of needlework, a little bit of acupuncture, good physical therapists. But those physical therapists, what I need are physician extenders, is what they call them. I can't do the mindfulness teaching. I need yoga people to be paid to do the mindfulness for me. I need nutrition coaches to do that. I need PTs to know about mindfulness. That's what I would love if you guys could do that for us. And I would love to be part of helping to make that happen. I don't know how to do it because I'm bogged down right now in a solo practice, because that's what happens to doctors who try to help the system, is they pretty much don't make a living and don't have any influence. I don't have any lobbyists to work for me.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, I think there's going to be a big shift with the healthcare reform bill, which, it's not perfect. Nothing is. Fix it as we go, but it's a huge step. And I think what's really going to be transformational is the business model for insurance companies has now changed. The game prior to the reform was we'll try to make as much money as we possibly can and cover people the least amount we have to. There were years where they'd actually increase their employment at the insurance company and decrease the amount of services that they would provide. So it was basically hire people to knock people off the rolls. Now the business model is, I'm stuck with you. If I'm an insurance, you're with me. I'm going to pay for you no matter what. So now I've got to invest in your health. And I think the smart insurance companies are going to start moving in this direction, and they're going to start saying, hey, you know what? I don't have all the studies that yoga is going to be this, that, and the other, but I do it and I know it works, and let's just get it out there. It can't hurt. Mindfulness, same way. So I think the business model has now changed, and I think we're going to start seeing more alternatives getting implemented. And I think that really is going to be the transformational part of the healthcare reform bill.
Thank you very much for coming today. I recently read something about Obama and even Romney going on vacations, and they weren't even able to slow down during their vacations and enjoy their time.
Yeah.
And so what we have, you talk about slowing down.
Yep.
At the top, it's still important what the messaging comes from. I think it's great local levels. But when we have presidents and vice presidents who can't slow down and can't speak that message, right, I think we're running into the same dilemma. The question I have for you is, because you're coming from a mindful place, is what's the receptivity you're having being the only one who is trying to slow down? Because most of what Congress says, they want the economy to ramp up. They want to spend more money. They want more jobs. But in reality, slowing down could be better because then we would have more value. So leadership, we have a leadership vacuum. You're the only one. How are you getting your message across to the other members? When you say the word yoga or meditation, they think you're crazy. And you're not crazy. None of us are crazy.
Thank you.
Maybe
Can
we
you
are.
come back to Ohio and tell people that?
I am in Ohio, but I get to Ohio. But thank you. I just feel I would love to anchor what you're doing, but you're facing a big problem because they don't know how to sit. They don't listen, and it's not knocking for being politicians. They've been trained a certain way. You have a different type of training, being an athlete, being yoga. So how are you going to powerfully lead them to transform, to get them more help?
The short answer is over time. Over time. You know, there's no magic wand that we're going to be able to wave, and it's the same as meditation practice or yoga practice. Like, you can't walk into the room on the first day, you know, and do the wheel. You get hurt. And it takes a lot of practice and a lot of sessions and a lot of time. And I think part of what we can do maybe as role models is to say, hey, you know, why isn't this done tomorrow? Now there's a balance between, you know, okay, I want to score a touchdown. I'm on the 20-yard line. We got 80 yards to go. But I'm not going to just throw 4 deep balls because that may be the quickest way to get there. You've got to figure out how to do it. And I think a lot of the local stuff will begin to, you know, demystify a lot of this stuff. I think having a lot of people from the military get involved and talk about this over time. There'll be, you know, the science comes online. There's new scientific data and studies coming out. It seems like every couple of weeks. So we continue to just, you know, methodically build the case and try to, you know, have some patience at the same time as you're pushing the edge. I mean, I'm not saying, oh God, I hope it happens one day. You know, it's you gotta, you know, lean in a bit and push, but be smart. And you know, what I've noticed now, like, I didn't talk about this at all with any of my colleagues, maybe, but for one, until the book came out, you know, and then the book came out. Now people are coming to ask me about it, as opposed to me trying to push it on them. And they're coming to me, and I've had guys, and I won't mention any names, come up to me and say, what is this stuff you're talking about here? Because I'm stressed out of my mind. Like, I'm ready to not run for re-election again. This is going to be my last time. I'm fried. You know, all of this stuff. And it's not just members of Congress. It's America. Like, we're all we're all in the same boat right now. There's a great column today in the New York Times. It's called about being busy. It's a great column. Get it, download it. It's fantastic. But it's just about not having any time to spend with your family, people you care about. So anyway, the short answer is overtime, and just slowly, like the one, I'll give you just one quick example. The first guy I introduced it to before the book came out was a Tea Party Republican guy him and I co-chair the House Addiction and Recovery Caucus. And he went to rehab a couple times and learned meditation. So he was just open to it. So when I said, they're doing a lot of this with, addiction and recovery, we should start using the caucus as an opportunity to spread the word. Boom. So you just find that one person on the school board, find that one doctor, and just start building your coalition. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for being here, and I really appreciate the place that you're standing in between these two worlds and being a trailblazer in the way that you are. And I think everything that you're saying really resonates for us because we've all experienced firsthand the power of this practice and the way that it's transformed our lives and helped us build a capacity to show up. And I think that's why we're showing up in our communities. This community we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years is really actively participating and engaged in social and environmental issues, and they're making conscious choices about consumption and what they buy and what they eat and what they wear. And yet when we invite yogis to take the practice into the political process, there's a belief that the system is broken and that their vote doesn't count and that they can't make a difference. So can you speak to why we need to step in and participate and really show up in that way?
Well, I would say the system is broken, but your vote still does count, and your vote still does count, and it still does matter. And I would just say that you can just take healthcare, but for President Obama winning Ohio 51-48, everyone in America would not have healthcare. Kids would still not get coverage because they have a pre-existing condition. And you can go, right down the line of different policies that would have been in place or not been in place because in a swing state, a few thousand people didn't show up to even vote. And what I think is really cool about this community is that I don't think I would say they're probably more progressive, obviously, but I do think there is a reach into a moderate Republican, independent voter that would be included in many yoga studios in Ohio. That would result, if they got active and energized, would result in thousands and thousands of votes in a swing state like Ohio. Colorado too is a swing state. Nevada's a swing state. New Mexico's a swing state. Virginia's a swing state. North Carolina is becoming a swing state. So you take this movement and you look at who's in the yoga studios, and not just who's in them, but who those people are connected with. More often than not, they're engaged in the community in other ways. They maybe have a little bit of disposable income, not that they can raise $100,000 for a candidate, but they can probably give a few $100, knock on a few doors, and really be a part of a machine that begins to shift. Like what I say to a lot of people, there are no moderate Republicans right now, and it's like, and it's harmful to the system that if Democrats were in charge and we ran the whole show, we'd screw it up. We'd go too far. There needs to be a balance in the system. It's the yin and the yang. I mean, it's just the way it's got to be, but there's got to be a middle ground and some balance, and I think what this movement can do is really provide some balance to the political world. And what I think could be most important is for this group to say, we know we're not going to agree with everybody 100% of the time. I mean, this is the most ridiculous concept in American politics today. The guy I was talking about, who I do the House Addiction and Recovery Caucus, this guy is as conservative, and I love him. Like, he's one of my best friends in the world. He is as conservative as you could imagine take your most conservative position, and he's way further than that. And he got beat in a primary by a Tea Party beat him. And because of one vote that he didn't go along with them on. Now, anybody married here? Anybody ever been married here? You know, like if you agree with your spouse 50% of the time, 60% of the time, you got like a great marriage. And now you expect you're going to vote for your congressman or congresswoman or senator, and you got to agree with them 100% of the time. That is so asinine. That makes no sense. So I think what this movement can bring is like, okay, I'm a liberal. I know I'm not going to agree with this person all the time because they've got a lot of other considerations. I'm a yoga instructor, so I maybe don't know what all those are. You know, I can't teach yoga, and they don't know all the different things that I've got to balance to push forward. You know, with the healthcare bill, you know, I was for single payer. I was for a public option. Well, we couldn't get a public option, so we got the best we could, and then you go forward. I mean, but then you'd have people mad at you because you didn't get a single payer healthcare system. You're like, dude, have you not been watching what's going on? We got the best we could, you know? And I think this community could bring a little bit of sanity to that kind of thing. Yeah.
I really think it's incredible that you're here. 4 years ago, I was the deputy political director for the Obama campaign, and I spent a lot of time in
Oh my
Ohio.
God.
And now I am a political advisor to yoga votes, which is
Hey.
quite a transition.
Great.
But one of the things I know is that the political, you know, whoever the new political person is, and the DNC are going to be reaching out to you, and they're going to need your help, and you're in the single most important state in the country, and your district, you know, turnout in your district is extremely important. And I wonder if you can make a condition like of your support being bringing them into this school, you know, and introducing them to this little girl, you know, and showing them the Peace Corner and kind of like forcing the president to, you know, confront some of these things. Because I do, or Michelle, like honestly,
Yeah.
Michelle might get it better.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just feel like you have an extraordinary opportunity like over the next few months because you and your district are so extremely important.
Right. Yeah. No, it's great. We're on it. We're on it. We're on it. We're trying to get Secretary Duncan, and we thought, as you thought, that let's get Michelle, because we've got a bunch of urban gardening stuff going on too, urban farming, to come to see our school. Because to me, that's what this movement does. We tie the room together. Because it's about urban farming and urban gardening and edible classrooms and mindfulness and yoga in the schools and really tying that and building community. So enough investments to knock down the dilapidated houses in Youngstown. For example, Youngstown was 180,000 people in like late 1960s. It's now, I think, not under 70,000. So you can imagine Detroit, Flint, you know, all of the Toledo, Cleveland, Akron, Pittsburgh, Erie, Buffalo, you know, you can imagine the older industrial cities. We need to knock down thousands and thousands of empty homes. The opportunity that you see is urban farming. Knock them all down, you know, raise the beds up, let's do some urban farming. Summer jobs for the kids. Learn how to grow stuff, edible classroom, tie the curriculum to it. It's like, you know, bike path, farmers markets, refurbish a theater in these older downtowns. I mean, there's a plan that can be implemented through all this. And all the while, you're building community. Farmers markets, downtown developments, you know, working together in a garden, sharing a lawnmower. You know, I mean, all of these things come together. So we're on it, and we're going to try to get Michelle to come.
I'll push Patrick as
Well, you do. All right, that's great. I love these little political people. So smart. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Beth. I'm the founder of Yogi News. We got to visit earlier, and what I want to say to you and to everyone in here, for years, yoga teachers have been going into schools and working with the kids, and that is absolutely so fantastic and important. And what you touched on, and I've done a research-based study, is the importance of tying in the teachers and the educators. And what I've seen is that after we would go into a school, it would be at the end of it would be the teachers who would be in tears at how their lives had changed from this kind of learning.
Right.
So our next round of research-based study, as you also mentioned, is then tying in the family, because it has to be everyone.
Right.
I mean, we can all sort of giggle when we say it takes a village, but it really does take a village. And I commend you for getting money into the schools and doing whatever you can to tie in that yoga, the mindfulness, we say on the mat, of course off the mat, and making it so they know that these skills are there from them every day, wherever they are. So I just want to say thank you, and to all of you who can do the same in your communities. It's where it starts. It's with the 2-year-old knowing that instead of, freaking out in my car or beating up my brother, I can stop and take a breath, and it's absolutely where it starts. So I think that's a great place where we can all start as well. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really when you see the teachers. I mean, that's the point that I wanted to get to. I mean, kind of the how are we going to present this? I thought I'll take the leap, get it in the classrooms, but this will start spreading when teachers start telling other teachers about it. And that's what happened. When I heard they added an additional 30 teachers, I was over the moon, just to think I had nothing to do with it, and it was just starting to spread, and the other teachers were saying, well, why didn't you ask us to get involved in the first place? And we were like, well, we did ask you, you didn't want to, but now they heard about it and they want to. So it's really exciting. And I think it's important too. Like if teacher union people, one of the groups we're really engaging now is the Ohio Federation of Teachers, and the lead person now in Ohio is very, very interested in this. She read my book. She sent me a note. She loves it. We talked yesterday. She wants me to talk at her conference to all her union leaders. I mean, I think, like I said, there's an openness to this now that we didn't have even probably 5 years ago. And those of you who've been in the yoga movement for a while probably recognize that. And you guys have seen it in the last 5 years, 3 years, because it's just going so fast. So I think there's a real opportunity. I'm really thankful, and this is really cool. So thanks for having me.